Welcome to the Stokecast, where each week we bring you an inspiring athlete, adventurer, or entrepreneur and dig into their stories and strategies for balancing work, life, and adventure while having fun and making a difference. I'm Jonathan Ronzio.
And I'm Emily Holland. Thanks for joining us today.
Let's get to it.
Today on the Stokecast, we have Clare Gallagher, a ultra runner, mountain runner. She has a lot of notable races and wins. One of the most notorious races, I think, Leadville 100. She won in 2016, which is epic.
She had the second, I don't know what that was. Can't talk. Second fastest time for a woman at Leadville until, or just second fastest time ever, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and then I would have to look up and see if that still stands today, but either way, she crushed it. Yeah, and we don't really belabor her races too much. We talk more about how she tricks her mind into continuously moving during those circumstances, which I think is a good metaphor for the rest of life. Definitely. Yeah. It's all about keeping moving, right? It sure is. It sure is. And she's also a huge outdoor and environmental activist, so she does a lot of work with Patagonia and beyond in her local elections and stuff. So this is really interesting. Yeah, it's a really cool chat with Clare Gallagher. Be sure to set aside the next 45 minutes to an hour or so and really absorb everything she has to say, because it's a cool story. It's a great journey of getting to where she's at now and just keeping the passion going, which is a very unique passion. Most people would look at an ultra marathon and be like, "Why would you ever do that?" And then a trail to that. Yeah. So it's like it takes a very specific person to be able to, as she puts it, you'll hear, find a state of flow in discomfort. Yeah. And figure out how to train your mind to deal with that and push through it. Yeah, absolutely. So enjoy our interview with Clare Gallagher. Thanks for joining us here on the Stokecast. We absolutely can't wait to really dig into your story and hear all about what you're doing in the, obviously in the running space, also with, the activism side of your life, and figure out where it all started and how you got to where you are and how you balance it all.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me.
So let's just kick it off right now by talking about, what are you excited about? What's going on in your life that's exciting, that you're stoked about, that, you maybe came back from a trip or you have something coming up?
Yeah, I'm excited on quite a few things, namely a wilderness bill in Summit County, Colorado, which is sort of like my backyard of popular towns in this area, like Vail, Keystone, Breckenridge, Copper, Silverthorne. And there's this wilderness bill is one of the first positive pieces of legislation of this current administration that's been introduced in the Senate and the House, and it would protect almost 100,000 acres of really vulnerable land above 11,000 feet. It's called the Continental Divide Wilderness Bill. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I hope to connect all of the little pockets of proposed protected areas and recreation management areas, which mountain bikers could use, and in September, I hope to run essentially the length of this bill, which is 250 miles. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Well, that'd be rad.
I have quite a bit of racing that I'm doing in between now and then, but it's a little more interesting than just towing a line. So that's what's on my mind right now.
Totally, and that's meaningful. So do you know if Pitkin County's in that? Because I used to live out in Aspen, and you mentioned Continental Divide, so Independence Pass was my playground.
Yeah, nice. No, it's not part of this bill. It's essentially, it's a stone's throw away if you're looking at a map. But the most west it goes is Breckenridge, Vail area. It's Holy Cross wilderness area. So. Close.
Gotcha.
All related, though, because Aspen would benefit from the economic boost that wilderness bills bring.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's awesome, and obviously your path kind of naturally leads into being an outdoor activist and being really involved with protecting the places that you run and that you run races in, towing the line. But where did this all start for you? Where did you get the idea, I guess, or the passion for trail running and for being out in the wilderness and working to protect those places?
Yeah, so there's no silver bullet answer. I've been asked this question a lot in the past year, and I don't think I've ever answered it the same because of one, like, depends on my mood, and two, depends on what I'm thinking about.
Right.
And so, like, a brief overview of the reasons is, like, I grew up spending time in Colorado outside. Grew up with a lot of animals in a suburban household with chickens, bees, goats. And like lots of gardening.
Nice.
On top of it, I was always like doing 14ers with my family, which are mountains above 14,000 feet. So that's just like it put a sense of place, like my place in the earth, like being very small and appreciation for the earth from a young age. Then I got into some environmental ethics in college. I really started drinking the Kool-Aid per se of like humans' duty to take care of this little miracle planet. And then more emotionally driven when I was living in Palau studying coral reefs. One summer in college, I was studying under a couple Australian like shredder scientists.
Awesome.
I became friends with like some local Palau fishermen who did volunteer work with us, like counting fish, and it's like really important for data to just like have people underwater helping sometimes count fish and size fish up. And this local fisherman basically is like so aware of the impacts of climate change, unlike the vast majority of Americans. And this is a guy, Arias, who never, probably graduated middle school equivalent education. Wow. And sees the effects of like developed countries' carbon emissions on poor island nations, from sea level rise to coral bleaching. And eventually people like Arias will go hungry because of connected actions we do, back in this wonderful country we call home. So yeah, I think about the people of island nations a lot.
I mean, when you're studying that, when you're in the water and seeing it, like, you can't ignore it. I studied marine biology and ecology and looked at like the
nice.
Ocean acidification and its effects on biomineralization of marine invertebrates and coral reefs, and like totally when you actually are immersed in that and seeing it, like you it's your responsibility to be a steward of it, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's hard to connect people, though, that's for sure. Like, I don't blame people who aren't like super versed in like marine ecosystems.
Right, for sure. I mean, it's hard to extend empathy beyond self unless it's like hitting you in the face.
Yeah.
But cool. Let's talk about like how that bridges into what you're doing as an athlete, and like where the balance is. I think that's kind of what we want to dig into with the Stokecast, is we're talking about how people balance work, life, adventure, while having fun and making a difference, and the strategies for doing that. And if you ask 10 people, 9 of them would probably say that being a ultra marathon runner and environmental activist is like not a career, but then you're the 10th person that proves that it is. So how do we tell the other 9 that you can do it too? Well,
first off, career, if you're talking in monetary terms, then that's not the case for me. At least
honesty, I like it.
Monetary, I don't think people realize how little money trail and ultra runners make, but that's not why I'm here, obviously. But in terms of balance, you definitely have to have balance because it's an exhausting sport. That being said, there's a lot of proof that a lot of ultra runners who haven't had an alternative vocation or full-time job or part-time job have been plagued by overtraining syndrome, OTS, and eventually or abruptly leave the sport because they literally run too much. So I'm trying to take notes from older mentors and just like being a student of the sport. I've chosen to engage in a very ludicrous sport in many ways and not run too much. And so since I don't have like a full-time normal career at the moment, I have molded this career of like things I care about. And it just so happens that a lot of ultra running happens outside on trails, and it's like such a no-brainer to connect trail running with being more environmentally engaged, at least like being aware of the people you're voting for, even if you live in an urban place. If you're a trail runner, there's plenty of reasons why you should care. So yeah, I've been just, I guess, like, I spend a lot of my time when I'm not running reading and writing and asking questions. Like this morning I was interviewing a lawyer who works for an applied environmental center that's suing the government in Boulder. So I'm like picking his brain on his career, and then I'm working on a trail running advocacy organization with some other trail runners. So these types of things fill up my time when I'm not running or traveling. Yeah. Which is really cool because it's important to like stay intellectually stimulated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So kind of going back to one thing you just said though, within that, what does not running too much mean to you? Like, what does that look like? What kind of things do you do to take care of yourself and make sure that you're not running too much as an ultra marathon runner? So
I've like dabbled in 100-mile type weeks, and it just ends up in extreme fatigue.
I would imagine.
I mean, some people can handle it. Like that's actually not too crazy for some people, but this year I'll probably average 60 like 5-mile weeks.
Right.
Like leading up to the World Championship race I just did in Spain, which was a 55-mile race with like 16,000 feet of vert. So it was pretty banga.
Whoa.
I was averaging like 60-mile weeks. So that's not running too much. I'm not completely tapping into like my adrenal. I think it's like your adrenal system is what can really mess with like long-term fatigue.
Right.
And I'm constantly getting acupuncture, body work. I just saw a chiropractor because I displaced some ribs.
Acupuncture is so great.
Yeah. I'm like, do all these little things. Otherwise, like, there's no chance I'm going to be doing this in 10 years. And I really want to be. So, yeah.
So speaking of doing this in 10 years, let's also talk about like how you bursted onto the scene. Most people know your story of just coming out of the gate and winning Leadville in 2016. But obviously you were running before that, and you had, I think you won a 100-miler in Thailand, and like running was a part of your life. You didn't just decide to lace up your kicks and go win Leadville, right?
No, definitely not. Although that sounds pretty cool. So kudos to anyone who's trying to do that.
Right. So what was life like for Claire leading up to being able to do that?
I raced collegiately at Princeton, so that's sort of the foundation of my running. My running identity was being recruited to run Division I cross country, indoor track, outdoor track. So like I could run in high school, and then I got to the D1 scene and ran all 4 years, but I was plagued with injury throughout, and I sort of fell out of love with the monotony of track and road, and I was underweight like most of those years. So I was able to discover trail running when I was living in Thailand and won this 80K in the middle of northern Thailand, in the middle of nowhere. And
that sounds
and
rad.
Then when I moved back, it was sweet. It was super weird. It just like everything in this sport is so weird. And And it just keeps getting weirder. I do Leadville. I'm like, what the fuck was that? Okay, I guess I'll continue doing this because I just ruined my dreams of being a doctor in a very quick quitting of my emergency scribing job or emergency room job and dropping out of organic chemistry too.
And that was all before Leadville?
Yeah, this was like 3 weeks up to Leadville. And I was just like totally didn't know what I was going to do with my life because everything leading up to then, I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. I'm on this like med school path, more or less.
So what was going through your mind in those 3 weeks that you were like, all right, this is it. I'm quitting all of this and I'm just going for this race and we'll see what happens?
Yeah, it was, well, one, I wanted to taper properly. It wasn't like I think had I really thought about what I had just done, I would have maybe like run too much leading up to Leadville because what I did was like kind of like a psychopath move a little bit, just like, okay, 180 again. My parents are like, what is she going to do with her life? But that being said, I mean, it was my first 100-miler. I had absolutely no clue what I was getting into. And so I didn't overthink it at all. I mean, I made my little like course plan, I think like the Tuesday before Leadville, to make sure like my crew had the right driving directions. And I didn't really know too much about it. I tried to be like I've mentioned earlier, a good student of the sport I was just getting into, but I don't know. I probably was reading like some good book that had nothing to do with running, and I don't know what I was doing, to be honest.
I love that.
Yeah, sometimes it is what it is, and it's unexplainable, and you just have a feeling and you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's amazing. And so, I mean, obviously runners know who run long distances that those taper weeks can lead to some sort of madness. I assume that reading and those types of activities help with that. But when did you decide that, suffering in trail running was what you enjoyed the suffer? And how did that process go?
Yeah, I think that has been innate for most of my life, as far as I can remember. I mean, actually, what kid likes hiking? I definitely despised hiking growing up. I thought it was so stupid.
Same.
And would cry.
On the same page there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess it's not a good sign if you're a kid who likes hiking. So if we're using that as like the benchmark normal, then maybe it was like it was really when I started competitively running in high school, where I really found a love for pushing myself and like running my first successful state meet. I think I was a junior in cross country in high school, and like tapping into the wells that I had never known like existed in the human body that opened my mind to how hard we could push and how cool it could feel, maybe in hindsight. So the whole like trail running ultra thing is just like a version of that. It's just a sick, longer, disgusting version of it.
Now, when you're going out on, one of these ultras, whether it's 50 or 100, like at what point do you usually hit that wall in your mind where you have to start mentally battling yourself to keep pushing forward, and how do you do that?
Well, it's very race dependent, and I can tell you the last 2 races I've done, North Face 50, like big races, in November, I hit that spot at mile 16, and it was awful.
Oh man.
I was like, all right, well, I got a little bit of ways to go, and I can either like fall back and sort of have a mediocre race, or I could decide to push. And I was like, well, I'm here, I'm with the leaders, I've got food, I'm not like shitting my pants too badly or anything.
Too badly.
And yeah, and so it's like, okay, I'm in it. But then this past race I just did in Spain, I legitimately hit that spot of like oh no, at like mile 7 in this race. And I'm not sure if it was directly correlated to a fall I took. I still can't quite remember, and I don't really care to look back at the race and figure out what it was. But I had a basically a 35 mile slump in the middle of that race, where I just kept going. And there's very few reasons why we shouldn't keep going in these races. And I'm fortunate that I at least put a big emphasis on fitness, even though I might like be nonchalant about it and, not dwell on my training too much. But at the end of the day, like if you show up to a starting line relatively happy with your fitness, like you can feel so crappy and still end up doing in the ballpark of like decent.
And that sounds like it's a magic thing. It's kind of incredible that humans can do that. I love what you said about there's no reason why we shouldn't keep moving. I mean, that obviously is a great metaphor for life as well. But I want to actually go back to people who maybe aren't familiar with, ultra trail marathons and how weird and how crazy it can get. Like, what are some of the weirdest things that have happened to you while you're in one of these races or in even a training run? Like, what are some crazy things that we can try to paint the picture for those folks?
Well, the biggest difference between ultra and trail and like road and track running is the time element, which means you have to fuel properly. So there's a lot of eating involved in trail and ultra running, which is bizarre because like this is like running shouldn't be about like mashed potatoes and chicken broth. So like my first ultra in Thailand, I found myself eating a bag of seaweed flavored Lay's at like mile 45 of this race. And I looked down, I'm like, what? I thought they were the most delicious things I had ever tasted in my entire life. and I had it coupled with this like instant coffee, sort of like kind of like a frappuccino, but it's Thai. So it's a little can. And like, what other sport do you find yourself like reliant on food that you would never normally eat? So yeah, that's a little, and I mean, you can take any food story, just for listeners, ask your trail and ultra buddies about their favorite food story, because they'll tell you 5 and then you'll be like, right, I'm either bored or I want to try this or I'm completely horrified.
Yeah, I think I read something about you, like the title was like that you ate your way through 100 miles while also running. Or during Leadville, I like people kind of caught on to I was running pretty fast during Leadville 100, and people were so confused because I was eating frosting, like icing, off of little spoons that my crew was giving them to me, and that just like doesn't happen, I guess.
Oh my gosh!
No one had thought of this like ingenious idea before.
That's amazing. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, right. So for anybody who has never run an ultra marathon and might be considering it, I mean, it's just an all-you-can-eat frosting buffet.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Now I use honey stinger gels, but frosting's great, man. I can't talk enough about how good frosting is. Makes me want to have some right now.
This does sound good.
That's amazing. So going back to Thailand in the race that you ran there, like what brought you to Thailand in the first place? What were you doing there? How did that all go down?
I was in Thailand right after college teaching English on a teaching fellowship, and I was in the south in a little fishing village with a bunch of like 700 underprivileged kids at a boarding school, and I was backpacking a ton on my weekends and breaks with other friends, and we were like, let's go to northern Thailand. And then I did some Googling one day, and I was like, great, I'm going to do a race while we're there, if you guys don't mind. And yeah, it was pretty much it. I needed something to do on the weekends as well, because I was pretty isolated. And so I really discovered ultra running almost on my own. Like I would do 90-minute runs, build up to 2-hour runs. Eventually I was running 6-hour training runs by myself, and like literally almost on the equator. It's like 7 degrees north of the equator, I think, where I was. So it's insanely difficult climatically, through the monsoon season, and then in the dry season it's super hot and humid. So I just was like discovering whole new elements of like how weird sports can get and running can get on these long runs in a really tough climate.
So that was kind of where the transition, like prior to that in college when you were running track, like how far had you run? If it sounds like Thailand was the first time you were starting to really push the miles and the time.
Yeah, the longest race I had done was a 10K on the track ever before that 50 miler or 80K. So you go from 6 miles to 50. That was my jump. And
quite the jump.
The longest run. Yeah, the longest run I had done was probably 15 miles or something. Just like a long run.
Before you did the 50.
Yeah, well, in college, I mean, so I didn't have a smartwatch when I was living down there, so one key 6-hour run I remember I did, I have no clue how many miles I ran. I could have run 20 miles. Like seriously, I wasn't breaking records, I know that, but
you never know.
Yeah. So I just went by time. It seemed reasonable.
Well, I love that. I mean, it's just such a organic progression into developing a passion that becomes a I was going to say career, but then I was thinking back to you saying it was like more of a passion than the career. But I really do love the evolution of discovering that passion. So, what is your take on, like, you know, the state of the sport now and your place in it and where it's going?
Yeah, I find ultra running and trail running right now to be so exciting. The rates of growth are incredible. Like if there's the stats aren't impossible to find, but from my understanding, road marathons, I think, took a dip in participation in the last year, whereas trail and ultra runs, if we're just looking at races, which is a great way to, you know, gather data and stats, has only to continue to grow. And ultra running is getting more people from like collegiate running backgrounds, which is really cool because it's making the sport way more competitive, which I'm a huge fan of. Like some old guard people still racing in the sport, I find to be a little curmudgeon-y about the fact there's like all this fresh new talent, and I love it. Like there's no way to go but up and faster, and you know, like trying new ways of training, and the globalization of the sport is so cool. Seeing what races exist in countries around the world is just mind-boggling, and I find my life to be really international, which I absolutely love, because I'm constantly mapping out new mountain ranges or looking at, you know, new mountain ranges, whether it's for a race or just somewhere I'm traveling because of like sponsor stuff or something. So that's what I think like a lot of trail runners are doing. You know, they'll like pick a random goal race, not necessarily like the most competitive in Europe, but you can plan vacations around running, or you can just discover a trail that you didn't know exist. Like in the U.S., I'm going back to the East Coast in a couple weeks for a Patagonia film tour.
Nice. Come on by.
Sorry, I'm just babbling. Yeah, I unfortunately won't get as high as Boston, but so I'm going to be in like the meatpacking district in DC and New Haven, and I was just researching like how close the AT is to these places. The Appalachian Trail is so close to these like huge metropolises, and I realized when I was living in Princeton, like I never even considered going to the AT, and now with the amazing thing called Google, I'm like, wow, the AT is 30 minutes from Princeton. I need to go there.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, your backyard the whole time.
And so I see so much potential with this sport, like for people to rediscover a sense of place and identity and in a natural environment with something that's like a sport that's a low barrier to entry. Presumably we only need a pair of shoes to run. So
right.
Like the inclusiveness and hopefully the expansion of diversity in ultra running and trail running is so exciting to me.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's something that I think anyone can get into given the opportunity. I mean, everyone has trails in their backyard, to your point with Princeton. But one thing I was wondering, so looking in Google, and a lot of people, utilize Google Earth to just be like, oh, where are these awesome mountain ranges that I can go running in that maybe people are not really aware of, or it's not totally touristy or commercial yet, and I can kind of get in there and just really appreciate the mountains. Is there any place like that you really have on your radar that you really want to check out, and you're going to spoil it for everyone now, but that you want to check out, or that's on your list for, with future running or future even races that you want to get into?
Yeah. Oh, my list is inexhaustibly long. Yeah, it's somewhat of a problem, but also not.
Good problem to have.
I love lists. Yeah,
lists are important. That's the only way to get things done.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I definitely look like far out, and I'm a big planner. So, like I said, I'm excited for the mountain range I actually know very well in Summit County, the Gore Range, to explore that in September when I go for this wilderness build run. But it's sort of like tomorrow I'm going to be going to the Sangre de Cristo Range in Colorado. So, and I've been looking at maps like all week about what I want to do. And in between like now and September, there's quite a few mountain ranges I'm very fortunate to get to go to, including like the Dolomites in Italy, and I'll be going back to Chamonix in August for the race. And it's so exciting. It's a really, I realize that it's a extreme privilege to be able to trail run, and I hope everyone else like can feel that way too, regardless if you're running 15 minutes from your house or across the world.
I would expect that they do. I mean, anytime you get a chance to take a break from whether it's your work or life, if your relationships aren't going well and you just go out for a run, there's just something magic about the disconnect and the connect that comes from it. It's like everything else disappears and you just find your center. And so many people who haven't found that in running yet just need to keep running, because it happens. You hit that runner's high and it comes.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I implore people to stay with it.
Right?
I'm in a slump right now. Like just after races, it's always really hard. It's usually very hard to come back feeling like a spring chicken. Luck, dude. It sucks. Like I feel so out of shape right now, even though I just ran a 55-mile race 2 weeks ago. But like today on my run, I felt a little bit better than yesterday.
It's the small things.
Yeah, right. So what do you tell someone that is like trying to get into running and feeling like, I'm just not a runner? Like, because I was that way. I was never a runner, and all of a sudden I am a runner. It just like it happens without even you realizing when, but you just got to stick with it. Like, what do you tell people?
I tell people to use mental tricks, because you have to trick yourself into thinking it's easier than it is. Like perceived effort is a real thing in many sports, but especially running. So if someone's just getting into running, I encourage them to go for do an out and back, so they know what they're getting into. Go out for 10 minutes and literally turn around, or go out for 20 minutes and then turn around. And it's like you do that and build up a little bit, and maybe in a month you'll be running a 10K. So that's what I do even still to this day. If I'm feeling under the weather or tired, but I know that my body should do a run that day. And I don't want to betray it with like my mind being lazy. I do the same thing. It's like, okay, just go out for a half hour and then come home, and you will have just run an hour and you'll feel great about yourself when you're done.
That's the thing, right? You never regret it afterwards. It's just the leading up to it to motivate yourself to do it on those days that you don't feel 100%.
Right. And I bet I don't know how you guys do it in Boston. I mean, Boston is an incredible city, but being in a cold Northeast, like having a long winter, I really commend people who run through tough winters. So
yeah, it's kind of incredible, especially for the marathon, because people have to train through the winter. So it's kind of like a test of endurance and character in the same. So it's an interesting spot to be in.
Right. Such good mental strength. Like, yeah, everything else in your life could be going horribly, like work, relationships, but at least I guess you have that.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, I think every runner can relate to that. Like,
now, when your body and your mind don't want to get out there, and you like, you know, it would be a good thing to do, but like you're battling that mental terrorist that is just telling you to stop or not to go. Like, what are some tricks that you have where you've been able to, you know, convince your mind to go?
Mental terrorist. That's a good one. I've never heard that before.
I've never heard you say that.
That's what I call it. That's my constant, like, if my alarm goes off and I don't want to get out of bed, I just know I'm negotiating with my mental terrorist.
I love that.
Wow, that's deep. I'm totally gonna borrow that or hijack it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's not that funny. I'm a big fan of time tricks. So I did this in Leadville. I did this in Western States last year, which I got 93 miles in before I DNF'd, and I've gone literally from minute to minute, even in ultras. And usually you can't look at your watch like every 60 seconds. Sometimes you'll look at your watch, okay, I'm going to wait a minute. And then you look at 20 seconds later and you're like, wow, this is not going to work out, you know? But if you make these little tricks, or you say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, usually your mind will be able to sort of inwardly or outwardly, however you want to look at it, meditate and zone out. And time can go by that way, like hours can go by. And I don't mean to like completely black out those hours or minutes, but finding a state of flow, even in discomfort, is completely possible. And I really trust like tricking your mind.
Yeah.
Tricking your mind into thinking it only has to do 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes or 1 more minute.
Yeah, finding a state of flow and discomfort. I love that. So we're gonna trade catchphrases now.
Yeah.
But that's so true. So the mental games are really important. Absolutely. I find myself doing that in running all the time. And it's like, I know that I could stop or go or whatever, but I'm just like, I'm just going to get to that stop sign, and that's when I'm going to stop. And then I'm just going to get to that next intersection. That's when I'm going to stop. And I think that can like relate to any sport, really. It's like,
or
I'm
just
life. Or life.
Checkpoints.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many metaphors for life, Claire, you're giving us today. Great. So I wanted to actually double back on the casual 250-mile race that you
for the Wilderness Bill.
Yeah, for the Wilderness Bill that you mentioned earlier. I don't know if it's a race, or are you doing it kind of on your own? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's not a race. I'm just going to be attempting a continuous push of it. So it's technically a fast pack, is what you typically call something over 100 miles in really difficult mountainous terrain, because your pack has to be a little bit bigger to carry all the crap you need for the longer period of time you're out there. So I'll probably have like a little bivvy to sleep in for a couple hours here and there. And I will do this supported, because it's not like a standard route. I'm not going for like any time, because no one's ever done this route before. And so I'll have my homies support me, hopefully, when whenever they can like reach a highway, or I do. And yeah, the whole point of it really is to get the attention of Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner, who is reluctant to support this bill. And the only way it can get a hearing in the Senate is if both senators from Colorado support it. Like, you know, the Senate doesn't care about a bill if not both senators from its home state support it. So I hope to possibly, you know, like get some airtime with him before I attempt this. But if not, I'm going to blow this up so that maybe it can get some attention through my effort there. And yeah, it's just cool to run for something more than just a finish line. Like, I will always love doing that. I think racing is outrageous and really beautiful, even when it sucks. But this sort of run is a lot more meaningful to me, and it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just go do 250 miles in mountains, you know, above 14,000, or mountains as high as 14,000 feet. So no, I don't really know, to be honest.
It's going to be awesome. How can we follow along on this adventure and
how can other people get involved? Like, I know probably most people aren't going to join you for a 250 mile 14er run, but how can people get involved in supporting your journey and the wilderness bill?
Yeah, so the biggest thing you can do, especially if you live in Colorado, is to sign a petition. It's actually on my Instagram and Facebook at this time, that is just asking Cory Gardner to support it. So it's literally the easiest click thing you can do. For people who don't live in Colorado, the coolest thing you can do is sort of take away from what I'm doing and hopefully look at your state and like, what's happening in my state? Like, maybe I should Google wilderness bills West Virginia, or wilderness bills New Mexico, or wherever you are, Massachusetts, Maine, and like see what's going on, because like America's so huge, and we need people being informed and educated and psyched and stoked and like super inspired in local areas, right? And then maybe you'll like remember the name of your senators, you know. Like, I was never super versed in politics or anything until the last couple of years, and I find it so empowering if you like are knowledgeable about who's making decisions for you, and trying to get their attention in some ways for things you care about.
That's great. And so we will definitely go sign the petition if you haven't, listeners. If you're in Colorado, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we'll be following along on your journey. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we're stoked on your journey here.
We're
thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. We're closing out, but it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And let's see, before we finish up, how about just one final piece of advice for anyone out there who is, you know, kind of discovering their own passion in the running or just the outdoor adventure space, and like, you know, trying to get a start on how they can pursue that while balancing work and life and relationships and anything else. Like, how are they going about doing it all, as, you know, having fun in the mountains with your friends and your dogs, and still doing work you're passionate about and making a difference? And if you have any thought about any of that. Oh God,
it's getting overwhelming.
How can you do it all, Claire?
Right? Yeah, no, I think it can be paralyzing to so many people who like care. It's like, oh, it'd just be so much easier to not care. But I say the biggest thing I'm always trying to remind myself to do is to plan that next trip, whether it's just like a weekend run, and especially with people maybe you know really well, like your partner or your best friends, or people you don't even know that well, but you share this common love for an activity. it's so easy to connect with people these days. So like making the most of connection and then getting after it, like get out to that trailhead, whether you like it or not, make those plans and make them in advance and don't bail. Do not bail on your friends.
That's a great lesson.
Put it in the calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like everything else follows, because we can't really be psyched to care if we're talking about environmental issues and climate policy, which are so important these days, if we don't have that sense of place on this earth, right? So that's like number one. There's that Edward Abbey quote that's like, be a part-time activist, only part-time, because the rest of the time you got to be, like crushing it in the mountains or in the fields or on the trails or in the valleys or wherever you are.
Totally. Love that. All right. Well, so I know you got to get out for a run, of course, which I feel like you and I, Emily, we should need to go for a run now.
Yeah, now we have to go.
Do it.
You've certainly inspired me. So I've never run more than like 16 or 17 miles, but you've inspired me to be ready for 250 by September.
Oh, amazing. Wow. I support you.
You'll be there with the frosting.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Eat well, get acupuncture often. Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much, Claire. It's been a pleasure. And have a great night. Have a great run. And we're stoked for your journey.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Well, you heard her. Eat well and get acupuncture often. Those are two really good pieces of advice.
Yeah, I don't get acupuncture enough, but I definitely want to after that.
Have you?
I'm really scared of needles.
Oh,
but I have a tattoo, so I don't know what that means about me.
That's interesting.
It's compartmentalized, I think.
Well, you should totally do it. It's
okay,
great.
Cool.
Especially the ones that they have the stim unit that they hook up to the needles, so it like gives that little electric pulse in your muscles.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, I definitely don't want to do it now.
Yeah, just tons of needles in your skin electrocuting you.
Well, Claire says I should do it, so I feel like I should do it.
You gotta trust her. Give it a shot. It does work.
Okay, well, if you want to follow Claire on social media, it's Claire_Gallagher_runs on Insta.
And she's also on Twitter. I love her handle on Twitter. It's at Puppies on Mountains, yay. And that's mountains with just MTS. I'm abbreviating. I think that's probably what it means. Puppies on MTS, yay.
Yay. And we'll put it in the show notes. And follow her adventures and her activism. And thanks so much for listening.
And also be sure to subscribe to the Stokecast so you never miss an episode, especially next week's episode, which is going to be a really good one. We're talking to a really genuine, funny, great guy. Who is that?
Brendan Leonard, one of my faves, founder of Semi-Rad and just an all-around great dude. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Emily Holland.
And I'm Jonathan Ronzio. We'll catch you next week with another episode of the Stokecast.